Hello, welcome to a behind the scenes look at VCA faders, because last week in behind the scenes I talked about groups and tagged on VCA fading at the end sort of. When I was making the quick tip for this week, I realized that might just be a bit confusing for people. So I thought it would be sensible to break down some of the differences between groups and VCAs and keep them as separate short tips so people don't get confused. There's also the added, is it confusion? Complexity that you can also have track stacks that either are folder stacks or summing stacks. And you can also use buses to control multiple tracks. So let's just think about VCAs for a second. Voltage controlled amplifiers. Basically, these are faders, and as regular commentator Jim informed me, often known as wild faders in the analog world, where you would have a bunch of spare faders that you could allocate different tracks to, but all you are doing with a VCA is pretty much controlling the volume. So you can think of VCA as volume control, but what you're doing is controlling multiple tracks at the same time. So let's assume we've got this mix here. There's no groups, there's no buses, no sends. All I'm going to do is I can either select the first one, hold down shift and select the last one, or I can select individual ones using command. So let's grab all the strings. If I want to be able to control the volume of all these relative, so bring them all the strings up and down, there's several ways to do it. If I want to do it with a VCA, you can right click in a grey area and click create new VCA. Then it shows us VCA1 over here on the right hand side. So I can call that string volume because that's what it's going to do. If I start playing back this track, notice that all the meters here have gone down. Also be aware that is because I'm in post fader metering. If I go to pre fader metering, even though you can't hear the strings, this is showing you the signal is still there. So the strings do have a volume signal, but what this VCA is doing is turning them all down at the same time because they are connected to this VCA. So this is now my string volume controller basically, and that's how it would have worked in the analog world. You would have had one of these faders and it would have been allocated to control the volume of those. Now, that's pretty much all you would use a VCA for, controlling the volume of different groups. So I might want to have all my percussion on a different VCA. So I could call that, let me get myself out of the way because I've just realized I'm in the way here. So let's just look at strings again because you wouldn't have seen that going up and down. But I can now bring the percussion down as well. just for the sake of making sure everything's got a VCA, let's call that tuned percussion volume. So I've got control over these. As you can see, because we are in pre-fader metering, it is showing us that these tracks do have a signal, but they are being changed in volume by the VCAs. Interesting point actually, the master here, that is just a VCA for the stereo out. Most of the time you ignore this and don't move it around, but it is possible to have multiple outputs. You might have stereo out 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 5 and 6, and so on, and then the master controls all of them, but generally you leave the master alone. So we've got these different volume settings here now. The other thing it can be good for is you can create a track. And what you could do with the track, let's move it up here. What I could do is add volume automation to the VCA. So now you will hear the strings come in and out. Let's drop that down. So you can see the volume going up and down here now. And it's often a good idea to move your VCAs. I suppose in this digital world you've got the freedom to actually move your different tracks around if you have them assigned to a particular track, so they don't have to just sit at the end. So if I wanted to move this, we could have percussion volume there, but move it down to above. Nearly. There you go. So you could have your VCA next to it. So that would be really useful if you needed to ebb and flow the strings in and out, and these individual strings also had automation on it, because that would be a nightmare to try and rejig the automation on individual tracks. So let's have an example where the pizzicatos get louder towards the end. If I didn't have the ability to control the overall volume of all the strings, so here, violin 1 gets louder and the others stay the same level. If I wanted this to increase, I would have to go in and edit the automation, as opposed to just having a VCA automated channel and doing it that way. Now, doing it with one track, not too bad, but what if violin 2 faded out, the bass did something weird like that? Now you'd have to be going back in and trying to recalculate all these, when all you really need to do is put a VCA on and automate the volume. Now, that being said, last time we were looking at groups, and this is where we created a new group and called it strings, because under the settings we can change mute, pan, solo, record. If we turned off volume group settings, okay, Oh, at the moment they're all selected. If I just select one, I can individually trim and mix the volumes there. Obviously it won't make any difference if there's volume automation already written in, but technically I can remix that. I think it's probably easier to do it with a VCA. If you're doing multiple editing, I think groups can be useful. So if we were let's have a look. So we've got strings on. If I mute one, it mutes them all. Solo, not turned on. If I activate solo for that group, they will all be soloed. Okay, so this is where the power of the groups happens. And it's quite good for multiple editing. So if we turn on editing selections, if I trim the end, oh, is that activated? Yeah. So every time I select one of these, it will select all of them and edit them at the same time. Now, I'm going to go back some steps here. How far can I go? Let's get rid of those. That was where I had the VCA faders. That was the string. And that's back to nothing done to the track at all. There's no VCAs, no groups. Bear in mind, the other thing you can do is I could take all of these and we could create a track stack. Now, if we do a summing stack, what this does is it changes the output. The VCA did not change the output. What this has done is we can collapse and expand the strings now. And there is a track, but this has an input of bus 1 and all the strings are going into bus 1. So it's a different way of routing things. As I play this, let's change the volume of the strings. So you see it has a similar effect. We go to as doing the VCA fader. So we've still got signal coming in, but you can't hear it coming out because we've decided on this track we can turn it up and down. Now with this we can also add audio effects. So that's a benefit of using a track stack. But you might not want the complication. You might not want to change this routing. So I think it's worth explaining the differences there, but for next week, I think I'm going to explain that the master is just a VCA for the stereo out and possibly leave summing stacks, because what you saw me do there was summing stack. You could also do a folder stack. Again, it's an organizational way of looking at things, but we can turn down the volumes as well. So what's the difference between a summing stack and a folder stack? As you can see, the obvious one is we don't have audio effects. So this is actually much closer to what a VCA does. So folder stack is an organizational thing, but you do get effectively a VCA automatically added for you. You don't have it popped on at the end. Is that better? I'll let you make that decision. But I suppose the ultimate thing is there are multiple ways to perform the same tasks in Logic. Working out which one works for you best. Logically, if you're used to the analog model and maybe you've got books that reference analog mixing and you want to use VCAs, absolutely, that's the way to go. And if you've already done work in this field, yeah, VCAs probably are sensible. If you're just learning a DAW for new, then maybe summing stacks and folder stacks will do it for you. So just learning track stacks might be okay. I think it's good to know a bit about all of it though. That's it for my behind the scenes thinking. We'll do a quick tip on VCAs next week, and then I'll have a think about what else we should add in. Comment along with Jim if you've got any suggestions. I'm sure he'll be there. That's it for this week. Don't forget to like and subscribe. See you in the next video. Bye for now.